Your mind is a powerful force. What you think and believe not only influences your life, but also the world around you. In this book, William Walker Atkinson, a master of metaphysics and a pioneer of modern thought, invites us to discover the immense power that lies within our minds. Throughout his life, Atkinson explored the depths of human thought, revealing how the mind not only shapes our reality, but also has the potential to influence circumstances, people, and even crowds around us. Mental influence shows us that thought is a powerful tool for creation. In these pages, you will learn how to project your thoughts, protect your mind from negative influences, and use mental energy to transform your life and the lives of others. This book is more than a guide to the mind. It is a map to the inner power we all possess. Each chapter will lead you to understand that the mind, when mastered and focused, is the key to changing the world. Prologue: The Legacy of William Walker. Atkinson. In the vast history of metaphysical thought and mental development, few names have left as deep a mark as William Walker Atkinson. Pioneers in the science of mental power are often discussed, but few truly understand the magnitude of Atkinson's influence. A man who, quietly and with great humility, changed the way the world understands the mind, consciousness, and reality. Born. In the second half of the 19th century, Atkinson was much more than a prolific author. He was a true explorer of the limits of the human mind. In a time when science and spirituality were often considered to be in conflict, he found a way to build a bridge between them, demonstrating that the power of thought is not just a philosophical concept, but a tangible reality that can change people's lives. This book, inspired by the teachings of William Walker Atkinson, is not only a tribute to his life and legacy, but also an invitation to explore the limits of our own minds. It is an open door to a world where thought creates reality, where influence is limitless, and where each of us has the power to shape our destiny. So as you delve into these pages, remember that you are not alone on this journey. Atkinson's words are more than simple phrases. They are maps that will guide you toward the discovery of your own inner power. Are you ready to discover what you can do when your mind is aligned with your deepest desires? Because, as Atkinson taught, the true journey is not outward but inward, toward the vast and unexplored potential of the human mind. Chapter 1. The Hidden Power of Thought. Each morning when we wake up, we are the invisible creators of what is about to happen. Our minds, often restless, are like the wind on the water. We don't see them, but we know they're there, shaping the waves of the day. Have you ever stopped to think about the immense power that lies in your thoughts? You might not feel it at first, but everything around you, from the light filtering through the window to a casual conversation with a friend, is touched by that energy. I have a story to tell, one that happened to me many years ago. One day, sitting at my desk, I found myself thinking about how some days seemed to glide by with unusual grace, while others were a constant struggle. I began to observe my thoughts more carefully. What was I really thinking before those difficult days appeared? I realized something. My thoughts had been like shadows, diffuse, loaded with fear and uncertainty. And on those good days, those thoughts shone like lights, full of clarity and purpose. One day, I asked myself in silence, is it possible that everything that happens in my life is nothing more than a reflection of what's happening inside my mind? And just like a traveler who finds the map they never knew they had, I began to experiment. What would happen if, upon waking, instead of letting my thoughts run free like leaves in the wind, I directed them like a captain guides their ship? The first morning was different. I decided that my first thought would be one of gratitude, no matter how small the reason seemed. I felt something in me change, as if an internal current was aligning with the river's course. Have you ever felt your day from the very first moment begin to flow more smoothly? I realized that my mental attitude, which I had always underestimated, was like an invisible engine that moved every aspect of my life. I won't tell you that everything changed overnight, but I will tell you that with each new day, I witnessed how my life was being transformed. My thoughts were the seeds, and my reality was the garden that bloomed. Now, if you ask me, how can I control my thoughts in the midst of difficulties? I would answer with sincerity. You cannot control the wind, but you can adjust the sails. Your negative thoughts won't disappear with a simple decision, but if you allow yourself to observe them without judgment, if you pause for a moment and ask yourself, what do I want to create today? You will realize that true creation begins within. We are told that life is a battle, but it isn't. Life is a dance, and that dance begins with the silent melody that plays in our minds every day. What music are you creating today? Because reality, like an invisible puppet, will always follow the rhythm you impose. The hidden power of thought is nothing more than the power of your own soul, waiting to be unleashed. It is there, in every breath, in every pause between one thought and another. Are you willing to discover it? And so, one day, as I looked at the horizon from my window, I understood that I was not alone, that within me, just as within you, there is a force so vast and powerful that it can change not only the course of a life, but that of an entire world. And that force begins with a simple but powerful thought. Chapter 2. Vibrations. The heartbeat of the universe. One certain morning, as I was walking through a quiet forest, I felt something in the air. Something I couldn't see but knew was there, like a silent whisper in the background of everything. It was as if the earth, the trees, even the wind itself were playing a subtle melody, a rhythm that my heart couldn't ignore. I stopped in the middle of the path, closed my eyes, and in that instant, I knew I was listening to the heartbeat of the universe. Have you ever felt that kind of connection, where everything seems to have a secret rhythm that you can feel, but not explain? I returned home that afternoon with a question I couldn't get out of my head. If everything vibrates, what rhythm am I playing with my life? I'm not talking about the music we listen to with our ears, but about a deeper vibration, an energy that permeates every cell of our being. I began to observe the world through that lens. The conversations I had, the places I frequented, even the thoughts that arose in my mind, everything seemed to be tuned to an invisible frequency. Have you noticed that when you're surrounded by happy people, you feel lighter? Or that when you enter a place full of tension, your energy changes without you fully perceiving it? What causes this subtle but powerful transformation? It's vibrations, those silent currents that flow from us and toward us, like the ebb and flow of the sea. I remember a day when I felt particularly tired, as if something was weighing on my shoulders. Everything seemed out of place, as if I were out of tune with the world. I asked myself, how can I change this feeling? Do I have the power to modify the vibrations around me? The answer, as incredible as it seems, is that yes, we do. That day, I decided to tune into something different. I started by closing my eyes, breathing deeply, and instead of focusing on what was weighing me down, I focused on the air entering and leaving my lungs. Have you ever changed your energy that way? I discovered that we are like musical instruments. If we let the vibrations of fear, doubt, or anxiety dominate us, we fall out of tune. But when we learn to control our own strings, we can align ourselves with the heartbeat of the universe, that symphony that never stops. Have you ever wondered what vibration you're emitting to the world? Over time, I began to understand that we are not only receivers of vibrations, but also emitters. What would happen if we started to be conscious of the energy we project? How would our relationships, our environment, even our health change? The vibrations we emit aren't limited to our immediate space. They travel like ripples in the water, affecting everything they touch. It's fascinating to think that everything that exists vibrates, from the most distant star to the smallest leaf. On the tree you see while walking, each thing, each being, has its own frequency. And when our vibrations are in harmony with those of the universe, life flows more easily. How can you tune into that higher vibration? The answer lies in your ability to listen, not with your ears, but with your heart. To listen to the heartbeat that has always been there, guiding you, calling you. One day, while meditating on all of this, I realized that I was not alone in my vibrations. We are all connected in some way. What I feel, what I think, affects others, and what others feel and think affects me. Have you ever noticed how a small gesture of yours can change someone else's day? Maybe it's a smile, a kind word, or even a comforting silence. All of those are vibrations we send into the world. And just as I learned to change my own vibration, I understood that I can also be a beacon, emitting light in the midst of darkness. How would you like to influence the world around you? Because believe me, you can. You just need to remember that the vibrations you emit today are what will shape your tomorrow. In that moment, as I immersed myself in the stillness of dusk, I knew that we are all part of a cosmic dance, one in which our individual vibrations intertwine with the great heartbeat of the universe. And that dance, although it sometimes seems chaotic, always follows a perfect rhythm, one that is waiting for us to join it, in tune with the best version of ourselves. Chapter 3. Mental Waves, Channeling the Energy of Thought. I remember a clear day, one of those mornings when everything seems to be in its place, as if the universe had decided to smile at me in a special way. As I walked along the path that led to the old oak tree, the one that stood like a silent guardian on the horizon, something caught my attention. It wasn't the clear sky or the birds singing, but a thought. What is a thought? I asked myself, in silence. I couldn't see it. I couldn't touch it. But I knew its power was as real as the earth beneath my feet. That day was the beginning of one of the deepest revelations that would change my life forever. Thoughts are waves, pure energy, that travels beyond what we can imagine. But not only that, I discovered that each of us has the ability to shape that energy, to direct it, to project it into the world, affecting everything it touches. As I sat under the old oak, a conversation I had many years ago with a person who was lost in their pain came to mind. They looked at me with tired eyes and asked, "How can a thought change my life if I can't even see it?" I replied in the only way I knew how. Think of a stone thrown into a lake. Even though you don't see the wind, the ripples it creates spread, touching every corner of the surface. That's what your thoughts are like, invisible but powerful. Each one has the capacity to generate waves that propagate, affecting everything around you. Have you ever wondered what kind of mental waves you are sending into the world? The waves of the mind know no limits. They don't stop at the walls of a room or the borders of a country. They travel like a gentle breeze, touching the lives of people you don't even know. How would you feel if you knew that every thought you have, every emotion you hold inside, is affecting the people around you, even those who are far from you? As I delved into this knowledge, I realized that we don't just receive mental waves, we are constantly sending them out. It's as if we are living antennas, emitting and receiving signals at every moment. I asked myself, what if we could consciously direct those signals with a clear purpose? What would change in our lives? The answer was simple but powerful. Everything, absolutely everything. Years later, when I was sharing this idea with a group of people, one of them asked me, "How can I use this energy to transform my life if my thoughts are usually chaotic and disorganized?" I smiled and replied, "Think of your thoughts as a river. If you Let them flow without control. They can overflow and cause chaos. But if you build a channel, if you give them direction, that same water can feed the land and bring life. That's what we do with our mental waves. By focusing them, by giving them a purpose, they become an unstoppable force. One day, while meditating on all of this, I realized that the key wasn't in controlling every thought, but in understanding that the quality of the waves we send determines the quality of the life we receive. If we fill our minds with thoughts of love, gratitude, and hope, those waves expand and return to us, bringing more of the same. But if we allow fear, doubt, or anger to dominate, those also propagate, creating realities we often don't have. You ever stop to observe your thoughts before you go to sleep? Because those thoughts are like the seeds we plant in the darkness, waiting to blossom in the light of day. What are you sowing in the minds of those around you? Because believe it or not, your waves don't just affect your life, but also the lives of those you cross paths with. The energy of thought is a tool we have carried with us since the beginning of our existence, but one we rarely use with true consciousness. Every day when you get up, you have the option to decide what kind of waves you want to send into the universe. Waves of peace, of fear, of love. It's all in your hands. Once I understood this, every morning became a ritual of creation. As I opened my eyes, I would pause for a few moments and ask myself, what do I want to project today? I would close my eyes, breathe deeply, and send waves of gratitude toward the day that was beginning. It didn't take long for me to see how my life began to align with that energy. Can you imagine how your life would change if you made it a point to send the best waves of your being into the world every day? Mental waves know no borders. They are the purest manifestation of our inner energy. They are the invisible connection between us and everything that exists. And the most beautiful truth is that you have the power to decide what kind of waves you are sending at every moment. So the next time you feel lost or overwhelmed by the thoughts swirling in your mind, remember this. You are not just a passive receiver. You are an active emitter of energy. And every thought you have, every emotion you hold, is a wave that propagates, touching everything in its path. What energy do you want to send today? Because in the end, mental waves are nothing more than the extension of who we are inside, and the world as we experience it is only the reflection of those waves returning to us. Chapter 4. The Law of Invisible Influence. One afternoon, as I was walking through a quiet park, I stopped to watch the wind playing among the leaves of the trees. Have you ever noticed how the wind moves everything in its path, even though you can't see it? I wondered if there wasn't a similar force, acting on our lives. A force so subtle that it goes unnoticed, yet powerful enough to change the course of our days, our thoughts, our emotions. It was then that I realized, there is a law that governs everything we cannot see, a law of invisible influence that touches every aspect of our existence. Just like the wind that moves the branches, our actions, thoughts, and emotions create invisible waves that affect everything around us. Have you ever wondered what invisible forces are shaping your life at this very moment? That afternoon, I realized that we are not only surrounded by these invisible influences, but that we are also emitters of them. Every word we say, every gesture we make, every thought we have sends a signal into the world. But what are we really sending? I remember a conversation with a man who, distressed, said to me, "I don't know why things always go wrong for me. It seems like an invisible force is pushing me toward failure." I looked at him and, with the calm that certainty gives, I said, "Perhaps that invisible force doesn't come from outside, but from within. Perhaps it is your own thoughts, your own fears, that have been creating that current." His eyes widened in surprise, and he fell silent, reflecting on what he had just heard. And it's true that, although we don't always perceive it, we are influenced by this law in every instant of our lives. Have you noticed how, when you surround yourself with positive people, something in you also transforms? It's as if their vibrations, their invisible energy, touch the deepest fibers of your being. But the same thing happens with negativity. If you immerse yourself in an environment filled with criticism and fear, you'll soon realize that these influences begin to mold your own thoughts. The law of invisible influence doesn't distinguish between good and bad. It simply responds to what we project. Have you ever stopped to think about what kind of energy you're allowing to influence you? Because whether you notice it or not, you're always being influenced by something, be it your own emotions, the energies of those around you, or even the vibrations emitted by the places you frequent. Many years ago, while traveling in an unfamiliar city, I entered a bustling market. The energy was intense, almost overwhelming. I could feel the emotions of people blending in the air, and suddenly, I felt swept away by a strange anxiety that didn't belong to me. I asked myself, how can a place affect my mood so profoundly? It was then that I understood that it wasn't just people who emitted waves of invisible influence, but that even places imbued with the vibrations of those who inhabited them also had an impact on us. That experience taught me that just as we are receivers of these influences, we also have the power to decide what we let in and what we don't. How can you protect yourself from the influences you don't want in your life? The key is to become conscious. When you become conscious of the energy around you, you also become capable of changing it, directing it, and transforming it. But the law of invisible influence isn't just something that acts on us. It's also a tool we can use to improve our lives and the lives of others. Have you ever wondered how you could use this law to your advantage? Imagine for a moment that every positive thought you have, every act of kindness, every word of encouragement, is like an invisible wave that propagates and touches the lives of those around you. Without knowing it, you might be helping someone through the energy you emit. I remember an occasion when a friend, dejected by life's difficulties, told me he felt like he was in a hole he couldn't get out of. I didn't know what to say at that moment, but I decided to send him a wave of peace from my heart. I didn't tell him about it. I simply did it in silence. The next day, he called and said, I don't know what it was, but I felt a strange calm last night, as if something inside me had changed. That's the law of invisible influence at work, without us needing to announce it. As I delved deeper into this knowledge, I realized that we can be beacons of light in a world full of darkness. We can positively influence those around us, even without saying a word, simply by sending out our waves of love, compassion, and peace. The law of invisible influence is always present, always operating, whether we are conscious of it or not. Do you realize how many times you have been influenced without knowing it? And more importantly, do you realize how many times you yourself have been the invisible influence in someone else's life? Because even if we don't always notice it, we are all connected by this invisible web of energy, where every thought, every action creates a wave that affects the whole. In the end, the real question is, how are you going to use this law in your life? Because you have the power to influence the world, to be an invisible force that brings light and transformation. And every time you connect with that energy, you are aligning yourself with a greater force, with the very heartbeat of the universe. Chapter 5. Mental Concentration, the Art of Supreme Focus. I remember the first time I understood the true power of mental concentration. It wasn't in a room full of books or during a moment of deep meditation, but during a simple walk. I was lost in my thoughts when I noticed a solitary flower in the middle of the path. Its colors shone with such intensity that for a moment, everything else disappeared. Has that ever happened to you? An instant when the world shrinks to a single thing and everything seems to make sense? It was in that precise moment that I understood the power of focus. It's not just a skill. It's a door to something bigger, an art that, when mastered, can change your entire reality. Mental concentration is that art. But what is it really? Many people believe it's simply about fixing your attention on something and not getting distracted. But I see it in a deeper way. Concentration is like a lighthouse that illuminates only what you decide to look at, and when you direct that lighthouse toward a goal, everything else dissolves into the darkness. Can you imagine what you could achieve if you had the ability to keep your focus on a single point without wavering, like the sun concentrating its rays through a magnifying glass? There was a time in my life when I was scattered, with 1,000 ideas floating in my mind, but none seemed to take shape. I felt like something was missing, that no matter how hard I tried, I wasn't making progress. I asked myself, what's stopping me from reaching my goals? The answer came in a subtle way. I lacked concentration. I lacked focus. My mind, although full of energy, was scattered in all directions, like a river that branches into 1,000 streams, losing its strength. Decided to do an experiment with myself. Every morning when I woke up, I would dedicate a few minutes to concentrating on a single idea, a single goal. I would close my eyes, breathe deeply, and with all my intention, direct my mind toward that point, as if nothing else existed. Have you ever tried to do something like that? It wasn't easy at first. My mind jumped from one thought to another, distracted by noises, worries, and emotions. But little by little, I began to notice something surprising. Every time I managed to maintain my focus, even if just for a moment, I felt an immense clarity, as if my mind had entered a state of perfect stillness. It was in those moments of deep concentration that I discovered what it truly means to have control over one's own mind. Mental concentration is the art of directing all your energy and intention toward a single goal without allowing anything to distract you. Have you noticed how much power you can generate when you focus completely on one thing? Years later, when I shared this idea with a friend, he asked me, how can I maintain my focus amidst all the distractions of daily life? I replied, the key is in training. It's not about fighting against distractions, but about learning to redirect your attention again and again toward what truly matters. It's like learning to walk again. At first, you fall many times, but with time, your steps become firm. I remember a day when, after weeks of practice, I sat down to work on a project I had been postponing for months. Something was different. My mind wasn't wandering, there was no internal struggle, just a deep calm and a sense of fluidity. Have you ever experienced that kind of focus, where everything seems to align and time loses importance? That is the true power of concentration. When the mind focuses with such precision, everything else becomes irrelevant, and you enter a state where you are capable of achieving whatever you set your mind to. But concentration isn't just about achieving material or work-related goals. It also has a transformative power in the personal sphere. Have you noticed how your life changes when you concentrate on the positive, on what inspires you and gives you peace? Energy follows focus. When you direct your attention toward thoughts of gratitude, love, or calm, those same energies begin to manifest in your life. It's as if the universe responds to your intention, creating a reality that reflects what you concentrate on most. One day, while meditating on all of this, I understood something even deeper. Concentration is not just a skill that helps us be more productive. It is a spiritual tool. It connects us with the deepest part of ourselves, allowing us to access a power that is beyond the everyday mind. Can you imagine how your life would change if you could apply this principle to everything you do? Not just in your work, but in your relationships, in your well-being, in your own inner growth? The key to developing this art is in daily practice. Every morning upon waking, take a few minutes to center your mind on a single idea. It can be a goal, a positive emotion, or simply a thought of peace. Let everything else dissolve into the background. Make it a habit, and you'll be surprised at how your life begins to align with that focused energy. Mental concentration is the supreme art of focus, a skill that we can all develop but few truly practice. And yet when we do, we discover that true power does not reside in effort, but in the ability to direct our minds toward what truly matters. So the next time you feel overwhelmed by distractions, remember this: you have the power to concentrate, to direct your mind, to create a reality that reflects your deepest intention. It all begins with a single thought, a single focus, and that is the supreme art of mental concentration. Chapter 6. Imagination and Reality. Creating your inner world one night. While gazing at the starry sky, I wondered where reality begins and where imagination ends. For years, I had believed that what I imagined was just that, a fleeting fantasy, a game of the mind. But in that moment, under the vast expanse of the sky, I understood something profoundly transformative. Imagination is not a mere escape. It is the very seed of reality. Have you ever thought about how what you imagine has the power to shape your life? I'm not just talking about dreams or desires, but about that inner power we all possess to see beyond the visible, to create worlds within our minds and then watch as those worlds manifest in the tangible. Imagination is the bridge between what is and what can be. What could you create if you knew that what you imagine today could become your reality tomorrow? I remember a time in my life when it seemed that everything was out of control. Problems, worries, uncertainty. Everything weighed on me like a thick fog. One night, exhausted by the internal struggle, I surrendered. I closed my eyes and let my mind fly. What if everything were possible? I imagined a world where everything fit together, where the answers to my questions already existed, where doors that seemed closed opened with ease. I wasn't planning or looking for solutions. I was just allowing my imagination to paint a new reality. The next morning, I noticed something surprising. I felt different, as if a part of that vision had become embedded in my being. Have you ever felt that way? As if something you imagined had become real inside you before you saw it reflected in the outside world? And so it was. Little by little, my life began to align with that internal image I had created the night before. Opportunities appeared, answers arrived, and what once seemed impossible began to take shape. It was then that I understood that imagination is the laboratory of creation. Every thought, every image we create in our minds is a form of energy that begins to work even before we realize it. Have you ever stopped to observe what kind of images you are creating in your mind? Because the reality we experience is only the reflection of that inner world that we are constantly imagining. I once shared this idea with someone who said to me, "But I imagine so many things, and none of them come true." I looked at him and asked, "Are you imagining from a place of conviction or doubt?" Because the imagination that creates realities is not the one that doubts, but the one that knows with certainty that what it sees in its mind is as real as what it feels with its hands. And that's what differentiates fantasy from the creative power of imagination. When you imagine with a heart full of faith, when you immerse yourself in that vision as if it were already real, you are planting a seed that will inevitably bear fruit. One day, while meditating on all of this, I understood something even deeper. Imagination not only creates our future, it also shapes how we interpret our present. Have you noticed how your perception changes when you choose to see a situation differently? If you imagine that an obstacle is just an opportunity in disguise, that same situation that once filled you with fear now becomes a stepping stone to something bigger. It's as if imagination were an invisible brush, painting the landscapes of our lives according to the colors we choose. What are you painting today in your inner world? Because even if you don't see it now, What you imagine at this moment is creating the circumstances you will live tomorrow. Over the years, I have learned that imagination is not something we leave behind in childhood, but a powerful tool that we can use every day. Every time we face a challenge, we can choose how we imagine the outcome. Do you imagine failure or success? Do you see a closed path or one full of new opportunities? The answer to these questions defines not only your mental state, but the very course of your life. I have seen people transform their darkest realities simply by changing the images they held in their minds. A man who seemed trapped in a dead-end job once told me, "I can't imagine anything better for myself." I replied, "That is precisely what is keeping you where you are. It's not reality that limits you, but your imagination. What would happen if you allowed yourself to imagine something bigger?" Little by little, he began to visualize a new path, a different life, and with time, that imagined life became his reality. Imagination is not an escape from life. It is the first step to creating it. It is that sacred space within us where everything is possible, where barriers dissolve and limitations vanish. Have you ever allowed yourself to imagine without restrictions? Because that is the true power of imagination. It knows no limits. It does not cling to what already is, but opens the doors to what can be. Every day when you open your eyes, you have the opportunity to choose what kind of world you are going to create within yourself. You can imagine from fear, projecting shadows in every corner, or you can imagine from love, seeing the light that shines behind every challenge. What world are you creating today in your mind? Because even if you don't notice it, that imagined world will become your lived reality. So the next time you face a difficult situation, close your eyes for a moment and let your imagination fly. Visualize the outcome you desire. Feel it as if it were already real, and watch as your outer world begins to align with that internal image. Imagination and reality are not opposites. They are parts of the same process. And when you learn to use your imagination as the creator you are, you discover that reality is nothing more than the reflection of that inner world you have been building all along. Chapter 7. Fascination, the hidden magnetism between people. Was an autumn afternoon when, while watching people pass in the square, I noticed something curious. Some people seemed to attract all eyes without saying a word or doing anything out of the ordinary. They walked with a powerful stillness, as if the very air folded around them. What is that invisible force that seems to envelop certain people, attracting others as if they were living magnets? I have asked myself that many times, until I finally understood that it was not by chance, but the result of a deep and mysterious phenomenon. Fascination. Fascination is a type of magnetism, a hidden power that resides in all of us, but which few manage to master. Have you ever felt how in a room full of people, someone can walk in and without saying a word, all eyes turn to them? That person doesn't have to make any visible effort, but their presence says it all. What they emit is not just their appearance or behavior, but something deeper. An energy that flows from within and which everyone perceives, even if they can't explain it. I remember the first time I felt that magnetism in myself. It was a day when, for no apparent reason, I found myself surrounded by people who seemed to seek my company, eager to hear what I had to say. What had changed? Nothing in my appearance, but inside me, something had shifted. I had discovered the secret of fascination. It's not about forcing attention, but about attracting it naturally, like the sun attracts plants toward its light. Have you ever wondered why some people seem to have that inner light while others struggle to be seen? Fascination, that magnetism between people, is a force that is born from within. It arises when we are aligned with our own power, when we accept who we are without reservation and project that confidence into the world. It is not something that can be faked or, much less, forced. Have you noticed how the most fascinating people are those who don't try to impress? They simply are, and in that being, they attract others as if they were the center of an invisible energy system. For years, I wondered what the secret of this attraction was. Why do some shine with a light that makes them irresistible, while others seem dull, invisible? The answer is not in physical appearance or in the words chosen, but in the energy we project. What is your energy like? Because that energy, even if you don't see it, is what creates the magnetism between you and others. One day, while talking to a friend, she confessed, "I don't know why, but I feel like wherever I go, people just ignore me." I looked at her carefully and asked, "What do you think of yourself when you walk into a room? Do you believe you deserve to be seen, or do you hide behind your own doubts?" She lowered her gaze, and in her silence I found the answer. Fascination begins with the relationship you have with yourself. If you don't see yourself as valuable, how do you expect others to? What we project to others is a reflection of what we carry within. If you feel insecure, doubtful, or full of fear, those waves expand and others perceive it even if they can't name it. But when you walk with the certainty of your own worth, when your energy is in harmony, the world responds. It's as if an invisible thread connects all people, and those who vibrate in tune with their own power effortlessly attract others. Fascination is that force that cannot be faked. It is the reflection of your soul at peace with itself, a magnetism that arises from your center and expands outward. Have you noticed that the more you try to impress, the more you move away from that energy? Because fascination is not an external act. It is an internal resonance. It is being so connected with who you are that others are simply attracted to that authenticity. I remember one particular moment that changed my life. I was speaking in front of a group of people, sharing ideas I was passionate about. I wasn't thinking about how I looked or how my words sounded. I was completely present, surrendered to what I felt at that instant. At the end of the talk, several people approached me and told me there was something about my energy, something that had moved them. What had happened? It wasn't my voice or my gestures or even the words I had said. It had been my presence, my authentic connection with myself that had created that magnetism. Personal magnetism is like an invisible field that we all carry with us. When you feel good about yourself, when you are in harmony with your thoughts and emotions, that field strengthens and others perceive it. But if you are full of doubts and insecurities, that field weakens, and others, without even knowing why, begin to move away. Fascination is ultimately the ability to be yourself without pretenses. It's knowing that you don't need to change or strive to be someone else to attract others. Have you ever been fascinated by someone who... So the next time you walk into a room full of people, stop for a moment and ask yourself, how do I feel about myself right now? Because the answer to that question will determine how others perceive you. If you are at peace, if you are aligned with your own truth, you will be like a magnet that attracts everyone around you. Fascination is a power that we all possess, but only some choose to develop. How are you going to use it in your life? Because in the end, that hidden magnetism between people is nothing more than the manifestation of our inner power reflected in the outer world. And when you connect with that power, you become an irresistible force, effortlessly capable of attracting whatever you want. Chapter 8. Hypnotism. Mastering the mind of another. It was a winter afternoon when I met a man whose presence seemed to envelop everyone in a strange silence. It wasn't that he talked too much or made grand gestures, but something much more subtle. He had a penetrating gaze and a soft voice that, without any effort, seemed to penetrate the minds of those around him. As he spoke, I noticed that people began to lean slightly toward him, as if they were being drawn in by an invisible force. What was that? I asked myself in silence. It wasn't long before I understood that what I was witnessing was hypnotism, not the theatrical kind seen on stages, but a more refined and powerful way of mastering the mind of another. Hypnotism is one of the oldest forces that human beings have discovered, a science that is not just about influencing another, but about opening a door to the deepest part of the mind. Have you ever noticed how some people seem to have the power to influence without even trying? This is hypnotism in its purest form, an invisible connection between two minds, where one takes the initiative and the other follows without resistance. I remember that after that experience with the man, I immersed myself in the study of hypnotism, seeking answers. I wanted to understand how it was possible for one mind to exert such influence over another. The first thing I discovered was that we are all susceptible to being hypnotized to a greater or lesser degree. Have you ever felt yourself getting lost in someone's words, as if each one were taking you deeper into a state of relaxation and trust? That is hypnotism, the art of guiding the mind toward a state of total receptivity. The key to this science lies in the power of suggestion. When a mind is relaxed and receptive, it's like fertile ground, ready to be sown. What we say, what we insinuate, is imprinted on that mind as an indisputable truth. Have you ever wondered how the thoughts and beliefs you have about yourself have been implanted by others throughout your life? Maybe you didn't realize it at the time, but you were hypnotized without knowing it. You were led to accept ideas, beliefs, and thought patterns that molded the person you are today. Hypnotism is not just about controlling or dominating, as is often believed. Rather, it is a dance between two minds, where one takes the lead and the other decides to follow. But the true secret of hypnotism is not in the words we use, but in the energy behind them. Have you noticed how the intention with which you speak can have a much greater effect than the words themselves? That is the essence of hypnotism, the ability to project an intention so clear and strong that the other person's mind is irresistibly drawn to it. During my studies, I began to practice the techniques I had learned. At first it was difficult, as my mind was still scattered and my intentions were not strong enough. But little by little, I began to discover that when my mind was completely focused on a single purpose, the influence I could exert over others increased exponentially. Have you ever noticed how, when you are completely certain of something, others seem to follow your lead without question? That is a subtle form of hypnotism in action. Once, while talking with a friend, I decided to experiment with what I had learned. I listened to him carefully, but as I did, I concentrated intensely on an idea I wanted him to accept. I didn't say anything directly. I just let my intention permeate every word he spoke. To my surprise, after a while, my friend began to express thoughts that exactly reflected what I had projected in my mind. What had happened? It wasn't magic or a trick. I had used the natural law of hypnotic suggestion to guide his mind where I wanted it to go. Hypnotism, at its core, is nothing more than the ability to align your mind with that of another, to create an invisible bridge through which your thoughts become their thoughts. It is a power that, when used with wisdom, can be transformative. Can you imagine what it would be like if you could help others overcome their fears or insecurities simply by guiding them toward a new way of thinking? That is the potential of hypnotism, not as a tool of control, but as a means to free minds from self-imposed limitations. But the true power of hypnotism lies in the ability to hypnotize yourself. Have you realized that you are often your own hypnotist? The words you say to yourself, the beliefs you hold, the images you project in your mind, all of them are programming your subconscious every day. And perhaps without knowing it, you have been hypnotizing yourself to live a life limited by fears, doubts, or negative thoughts. So the next time you face a difficult situation, ask yourself, What kind of suggestion am I giving myself right now? Because if you can master your own mind, you will be able to influence not only your reality, but also that of others. Hypnotism is nothing more than the ability to project a vision so clear and powerful that the minds around you, including your own, are irresistibly drawn to it. The mind is like a vast and deep ocean, and hypnotism is the compass that allows you to navigate those invisible waters. How are you going to use this power? Because in the end, we are all hypnotists and subjects. At the same time, guiding and being guided by the energies and intentions that surround us. And when you learn to master this art, you discover that true influence does not reside in control, but in the deep connection between minds that share a common purpose. Chapter 9. Influence at a Distance. Overcoming Physical Barriers, I had heard. Many stories about influence at a distance, but they always seemed like distant tales, almost impossible. How could one mind influence another without even being close? It wasn't until I experienced this truth for myself that I understood the real power that existed in the connection between minds beyond physical barriers. It was a quiet afternoon when I decided to test an idea that had been on my mind for a long time. I was far away from someone who, for weeks, had been resisting some advice I had carefully tried to give them. I decided to try something different, something that didn't involve direct words or physical meetings. I sat in silence, closed my eyes, and with a calm heart and a clear mind, I imagined that person in front of me. I visualized them as receptive, open, and willing to receive the influence of my thought. I felt my energy flowing toward them, as if my thoughts were a serene river crossing the distance that separated us. Have you ever wondered how your thoughts, even if not expressed aloud, can reach others, even when they are not present? Influence at a distance is a reality as subtle as it is powerful. No matter how many miles separate you from someone, minds are not limited by space. Just like the wind that crosses mountains and oceans, thought also travels, and when you direct it with clear intention, its effect is inevitable. A few days passed after my experiment, and to my surprise, the person who had so resisted my advice contacted me. She told me about a sudden clarity she had, as if something inside her had changed for no apparent reason. What had really happened? There were no words or physical contact, but the power of intention, directed with the precision of an arrow, had crossed the distance and touched her mind. From that day on, I realized that influence at a distance was not a myth, but a natural law that we can all use if we learn to direct our energies. Have you ever stopped to think about how your thoughts are influencing those you love, even when you're not with them? Every emotion we feel, every image we project in our mind, has the power to reach those we are connected with, regardless of the distance that separates us. I remember once sharing this experience with a friend who asked me skeptically, "How is it possible to influence someone if you're not physically present?" I replied with the simplicity that truth brings. Physical barriers only exist for our bodies, but not for our minds. Thought is energy, and energy knows no limits of time or space. At first, he didn't believe me, but I challenged him to do his own experiment. I told him that the next time he thought of someone he had lost contact with, he should try to project his thoughts toward that person, wishing them the best and sending a clear intention of connection. A few days passed, and my friend returned, surprised. The person in question, whom he hadn't spoken to in months, called him for no apparent reason. Was it a coincidence? I don't think so. The connection between minds is much deeper than what we can see with our eyes. Has something similar ever happened to you, where you think of someone and suddenly that person contacts you? This is not chance. It's influence at a distance working in ways we still can't fully comprehend. Over time, I discovered that the key to exerting this influence lies in the clarity of your intention. You cannot influence others if your thoughts are scattered or full of doubts. How do you expect someone else to receive your message if you yourself don't know what you want to transmit? The mind must be like a precise arrow aimed at a clear target. Only then will your thoughts travel through space and find their destination, like a seed that, when it falls on fertile ground, inevitably bears fruit. But influence at a distance is not just for those we love or know. We can also influence situations, circumstances that seem to be beyond our control. Have you ever wondered if you could change a situation simply by projecting your intention toward it, without needing to act physically? The answer is yes. Just as you can influence the mind of another person, you can also send your thoughts toward a future event, toward a situation you want to transform. I have seen this in my own life, and in the lives of those who have experienced this truth. I have seen how a focused mind, directed with purpose, can overcome physical barriers, shape realities, and touch souls without needing to be present. Can you imagine what you could achieve if you learned to use this power with wisdom and love? Distance would then cease to be an obstacle, and the connection between minds would become an invisible bridge that would unite you to everything and everyone, regardless of the distance. Influence at a distance is a natural law available to all of us, and its conscious use can transform not only our relationships but also our lives. What are you projecting today? Because what you think, what you feel, and what you send with your mind does not stay with you. It travels, touches, and transforms. And when you learn to consciously direct that energy, you will discover that physical barriers were never more than an illusion. Chapter 10. Mass Influence. The Power to Control. Crowds. Remember the first time I experienced the power of influencing a crowd. It was in a crowded room with whispers floating in the air like uncontrollable waves. The people were agitated, scattered, each one lost in their own thoughts. At first, I felt a kind of disconnection, as if it were impossible to attract their attention and direct it toward a single purpose. How is it possible for a single mind to influence so many at the same time? I asked myself. But something inside me knew that if I could connect with them, I could guide the crowd as easily as a current carries a leaf. I took a deep breath, focused on my purpose, and began to speak. The first words floated in the air, barely touching the ears of some. But as I continued, I felt a subtle energy moving between us. It wasn't just the sound of my voice, but something deeper, something that vibrated in every word. Have you ever felt how a simple idea can begin to spark in the minds of those who are listening to you? That is mass influence, an invisible current that travels from one mind to another until the entire group is tuned to the same frequency. Soon, the murmuring of the crowd began to disappear. Eyes focused on me, breaths synchronized, and something incredible happened. The power of influence had taken hold of everyone. Have you ever wondered how great leaders, speakers, or public figures are able to move masses with just a few words? It's not just what they say, but how they say it. It's the energy they project, the conviction with which they speak, that attracts the crowd like a magnet. As I continued to speak, I felt that the room was no longer a collection of individuals, but a single entity, a crowd that breathed in unison, that moved like a wave under the guidance of an invisible force. How is this achieved? Through the magnetism of the mind, a mind that is capable of projecting a clear and strong idea, powerful enough to penetrate every person who hears it. After that day, I began to study the phenomenon of mass influence more deeply, not just in the context of speeches, but in all areas of life where crowds seem to move as a single organism. I discovered that deep down, all human beings want to be connected. They want to be guided by a force that gives them direction. Have you ever felt lost in the middle of a crowd, only to realize that everyone seems to be moving in the same direction, without questioning it? That is mass influence in its purest form, the power of one mind over many. But this influence is not something that can be forced. It's like a delicate dance between the leader and the crowd, where both play their part. The key lies in emotional leadership. If you can connect with the emotions of a crowd, if you can make them feel what you feel, then there will be no barrier to prevent you from directing their attention wherever you want. Have you ever noticed how a collective emotion can change the course of an entire situation? That is the true nature of mass influence. It's not just rational, it's emotional. I remember an occasion when I had the opportunity to speak to a crowd that was initially filled with skepticism. You could see the closed faces, the crossed arms, the invisible resistance that stood between them and my message. I knew that if I limited myself to using empty words or facts, I wouldn't be able to break through that barrier. So I decided to change my approach. What would happen if, instead of trying to convince them, I spoke to them from the heart, sharing my deepest emotions? That's what I did. With every word I uttered, I let my emotions guide the tone, the rhythm, and the message. Little by little, I saw how the expressions began to soften, eyes opened wider, and bodies relaxed. The resistance vanished. The crowd that at first seemed uncontrollable was now connected with me in a way that language itself can't fully explain. Have you ever experienced that moment where everything seems to align and you feel like you can move mountains with just the power of your voice? That is the power of mass influence, when emotions synchronize and the message becomes a unifying force. Over the years, I learned that mass influence is not just about speaking, but about listening. How can you influence a crowd if you don't understand what they need? If you can capture the emotional pulse of a group of people, you will know exactly how to guide their thoughts and emotions toward where you want. It's like playing a symphony in which every note is perfectly synchronized with the collective heart of the crowd. The power to control crowds is not a cheap trick or a tool of manipulation. It is the ability to connect with the deepest part of the human being, with their desires, their fears, and their aspirations. Can you imagine what you could achieve if you could use this power for good, to uplift others and guide them toward a common purpose? Because true influence does not reside in control but in inspiration. And when you manage to inspire a crowd, when you give them something to believe in, they will follow you not because you are manipulating them, but because you have touched something within them that was always waiting to be awakened. So the next time you find yourself in front of a group of people, remember this: it's not just about what you say, but how you say it, and more importantly, what you feel. If you can align your thoughts, your words, and your emotions with the heart of the crowd, you will have unlocked the secret of mass influence. What do you want to inspire in others today? Because when you understand this power, you can not only change the course of a crowd, but you can transform the entire world. Chapter 11. Mental Protection: Strengthening Your Mind Against Influence. I remember one day, while walking down a bustling street, feeling the energy of the people around me envelop me like an invisible mist. Every face, every gaze seemed to carry an emotional burden that I couldn't help but absorb. Have you ever felt that way? As if you were picking up the thoughts, emotions, and worries of others, even without wanting to? That day, I understood something vital. Our mind, if it is not protected, is like an open door through which the influences of others can enter without us even realizing it. The mind is a sacred space, but if we don't fortify it, it is exposed to external currents, to the vibrations that others project without even knowing it. Have you ever wondered why, after spending time with certain people, you feel exhausted or confused? It's not just their physical presence that affects you, it's their mental energy. They're invisible thoughts and emotions that flow toward you. And so, without realizing it, you find yourself influenced by ideas and feelings that don't belong to you. That day, I decided that I would no longer allow my mind to be a receptacle for external influences. I began to study and practice techniques that would help me build an invisible barrier, a mental protection that would allow me to interact with the world without losing my center. How can you protect your mind when external influences are so powerful and omnipresent? The answer is not in avoiding contact with others, but in strengthening your mind from within so that external influences cannot penetrate your mental field. First, I thought it would be enough to maintain positive thoughts and avoid stressful situations, but I soon realized that wasn't enough. How can you control all the circumstances of life? You can't. True mental protection is not about isolating yourself from the world, but about developing an internal force so powerful that external vibrations don't affect you. It's like learning to swim in the middle of a choppy ocean without letting the waves drag you away. I began to practice a simple but effective technique. Every morning when I woke up, I would take a few minutes to visualize a sphere of light surrounding my mind, an invisible barrier that would protect me from external influences. I felt that shield strengthen with every breath, creating a layer of impenetrable energy that kept my mental field clean and clear. Have you ever noticed how your mind feels lighter when you take a moment to center yourself before facing the day? That is the first key to mental protection, conscious preparation. Over time, I noticed that the energies of others no longer affected me as much. I could be surrounded by people who would have previously made me feel exhausted or overwhelmed, and yet my mind remained calm, like a still lake. Can you imagine how your life would change if you could interact with anyone, regardless of their mental or emotional state, and maintain your inner peace? That is the freedom that mental protection brings. Someone once asked me, "How can you protect your mind if you can't even see the influences around you?" I replied, "You don't need to see them with your eyes, only to feel them with your mind. When you are in tune with yourself, you can detect when an external energy is trying to enter your space, and in that moment, you have the power to decide whether to let it in or reject it." The simple act of being conscious of what you are receiving is in itself a form of protection. But protecting the mind doesn't mean becoming insensitive or indifferent to others. It means learning to discern which influences you accept and which you reject. Have you realized how many of the thoughts and beliefs you have today are not really yours? They were planted by the words of others, by the expectations of society, by the fears you absorbed from your environment. Strengthening the mind against external influence is not just an act of protection, it is also an act of freedom, the freedom to be yourself without the invisible chains of other people's opinions and energies. One day, while talking with a friend, I realized that he was also struggling with external influence, although he didn't know it. He said to me, "I feel like I'm constantly being pulled in directions I don't want to go, as if I no longer have control over my own life." I listened to him in silence and then asked, "How many of the decisions you've made lately are really yours? And how many are the result of what others expect of you?" His face tensed, and I knew I had touched on a truth he hadn't wanted to see. The mind, if not protected, is vulnerable not only to energies, but also to the expectations and pressures of the world. But when you strengthen your mind, when you build that invisible barrier, you can move through life without being swept away by the currents around you. Can you imagine what you could achieve if your mind were impenetrable to negative influences, but always open to the positive and uplifting? That is true mental protection. It is not a rigid wall that isolates you, but a shield that only lets in what nourishes your spirit. Mental protection is a daily practice, a commitment to yourself. It's not something that is achieved overnight, but with time you will realize that your mind becomes stronger, more resilient. You will be able to face any situation, any person, and maintain your center, your inner peace, intact. So the next time you feel that external influences are trying to invade your mind, stop for a moment, breathe deeply, and remember, you have the power to protect your mental space. Visualize that shield of light. Feel it surround you and watch as the energies that don't serve you bounce off and dissolve. How are you going to protect your mind today? Because when you master the art of mental protection, you not only free yourself from external influences, but also connect more deeply with your true self, with that sacred space within you that has always been waiting to be discovered and strengthened. Chapter 12. The Future of Mental Influence, Science and Metaphysics. Converging it was a quiet night, and as I watched the stars from my window, I wondered, where is the power of the mind heading? For centuries, man has explored the depths of his being, seeking to understand the scope of his influence, his thought, and his ability to shape the world around him. At some point between what we call science and what we call metaphysics, there is an invisible bridge, a deep connection that has been present since the beginning of time. How do these two worlds intertwine? That is the question that, now more than ever, invites us to contemplate the future of mental influence. I remember, once when I began to explore the limits of my own mind, how it seemed to me that science and the invisible were in constant contradiction. Scientists would tell me about the electrical impulses in the brain, about how neural connections created thoughts, emotions, and perceptions. On the other hand, metaphysical wisdom revealed to me that those thoughts and emotions were not mere chemical discharges, but forces that had the power to project themselves, to influence other people and the environment. Have you ever wondered if science, with all its precision, can truly capture what the mind is capable of doing? Over time, I began to see that these two worlds were not in conflict, but in a delicate balance, one that is destined to converge in the coming years. The most advanced scientific research, with its studies on energy, the mind, and human behavior, is beginning to reach truths that the ancients already knew, truths that speak of the connection between all human beings, of how our thoughts not only affect our lives, but also the collective field in which we all exist. Can you imagine how the world will change when science finally understands that the mind is much more than matter? Just a few decades ago, the idea that our thoughts could influence our reality was viewed with skepticism by science. But today, the study of the brain, quantum energy, and mental waves is revealing something extraordinary. Our thoughts are not confined within our skulls. They travel, they expand, they interact with the physical world in ways we are just beginning to understand. How is it possible for something intangible, like a thought, to influence what is tangible? That is the question that science is beginning to answer and that metaphysics has always known. One of the moments that deeply marked me was when I discovered the experiments on directed intention. Scientists would place a plant in a room, while, in another, a person would concentrate on sending it positive thoughts. Even though there was no physical contact or visible interaction, the plant responded. It grew stronger, more vibrant. How to explain this phenomenon? Science still struggles to decipher it, but the answer lies in the very nature of thought as a form of energy that, like any other energy, can influence its environment. Metaphysics has always spoken of this connection. We know, for example, that when we direct our thoughts with enough intention, they can travel through time and space, touching those we wish to influence and even altering the course of events. Science, for its part, is beginning to discover the role that consciousness plays in the quantum world, that strange and fascinating place where particles behave in ways that defy all known laws of physics. Have you ever wondered if our thoughts could be playing an active role in the creation of the reality we perceive? The future of mental influence, then, is a dance between science and metaphysics. Science will offer us the tools to measure, to observe, to confirm what the mind is capable of doing. But metaphysics will teach us how to use that power consciously, guided by purpose and wisdom. How do you think the world will change when we deeply understand that our thoughts are the most powerful force we possess? Imagine a world where every person is aware of their ability to influence not only their own life, but the lives of others, where the mind becomes a tool of deliberate creation and not a field of uncontrolled chaos. One afternoon, while talking with a friend who worked in the field of neuroscience, he told me, "We are discovering amazing things about the brain, but we still can't explain how a simple intention seems to alter physical reality." I smiled and replied, "That's because you're looking for the answer in matter when the key is in thought. Thought is not just the product of the brain, it is the spark that ignites everything else." In the future, science will advance enough to confirm what many of us already know deep in our being, that the mind is the greatest force in the universe. And when that happens, we will see a transformation in the way we live, work, and relate to Epilogue, the journey to inner power. Throughout this journey, we have explored the mysteries of the mind, that vast territory that defines us and yet remains largely an enigma. We have walked the paths of influence, discovering that our minds are not separate islands, but are connected by invisible threads that allow us to influence, be influenced, and ultimately mold the reality around us. What have you learned on this journey, beyond the words and concepts? I hope you have felt a spark, a truth resonating deep in your being, that the power residing within you is much greater than you ever imagined. This is not just the end of a book. It is the beginning of something much bigger, an awakening to the true capacity you have to direct your mind and, with it, the course of your life. I remember walking many years ago with my mind full of doubts and questions, looking for answers outside of myself, believing that solutions would come from something external. But with time and the patience of experience, I understood that the real magic is not in the outer world, but in the mind's ability to shape it. How do you feel knowing that within you, you carry the most powerful tool in the universe? The journey of mental influence does not end here. What you have read is just the beginning. Every day, every moment is an opportunity to put into practice what you have learned, to experience the power of your thoughts, your focus, and your intention. What will change in your life now that you know what you can do with your mind? Because true knowledge is not just what we learn, but what we apply in our daily lives. The future you imagine is the future you create. There are no limits to what you can achieve when you align yourself with the inner power that has always been there, waiting to be discovered. Science and metaphysics have given us the tools and the understanding, but it is your will, your practice, and your belief that will make the difference. So as you close this book, don't close the door to what you have learned. Take it with you, use it, and become the master of your own mind, the conscious creator of your reality. How will you choose to influence the world around you? That is the question that remains at the end of it all, the question that only you can answer. Because in the end, the power of the mind is not a knowledge that is kept in books. It is a living force, a journey that each of us undertakes throughout our lives. And now, the next step is yours. If this audiobook has inspired you, imagine what you can discover with many more. Don't let knowledge and spiritual growth stop here. Explore our complete playlist and immerse yourself in more transformative wisdom. And if you truly want to elevate your life from different points of view on spirituality, I invite you to visit my channel, Loaiza Martinez, where you will find in-depth spiritual content to continue expanding your mind and your being. Don't miss the opportunity to continue transforming your reality. Take the next step now. Thank you very much.